Hi and welcome to Let's Talk, all about books, social media and good times going on in Auckland. Carole Beu's in soon with her regular book review, and I'll be on about my word of the week, which this time is that overused acronym OMG, which was certainly said a lot back in 1994 when top crime writer Anne Perry was revealed as Juliette Hume, one of the two girls who committed the infamous long ago Parker Hume murder in Christchurch. Joanne Drayton, who's just written a book on the search for Anne Perry, is joining me soon to talk about it. But first up is Davin Bray, who manages the Tepid Baths and who can tell us about its great new incarnation as the hot spot for Auckland swimmers. Hi Davin, welcome to Let's Talk. It's great to have you in.
Thanks very much.
So, Tepid Baths, when did you open again?
We opened on the 24th of June with a mural opening with, all the dignitaries in the world,
and it's been roaring along ever since.
It has, yes.
Auckland is pouring back in the doors of a venerable institution then.
It has changed a lot since we closed 2 years ago. The numbers seem to be far increased on what we had.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, the weekend numbers used to be very, very quiet, and it's actually our busiest 2 days of the week now, Saturday, Sunday.
So how old are the Teps?
98 years old. It was built in
Wow.
1914.
So nearly 100 years, yes.
Yep.
So, and it must have had some amazing history going right back then. I mean, it was kind of horse and cart days, wasn't it? Almost.
Very much so,
There
yeah.
been many vehicles on the street when it
Not a
opened.
lot, no.
Yeah.
Back when it was built, it was a saltwater pool. I think back in 1984, they changed it to freshwater and chlorine.
Right.
So,
and why was it called the Tepid Baths to start with? I mean, there's no underground
It was
hot
it was
water,
called the
is there?
Tepid Baths because originally the water was sent up to the tramworks and then to the boilers up there, and it would come back to the pool tepid.
Right.
Not hot, but tepid. So yeah, that's where the name came from.
Oh, okay. And but it's still fairly tepid, presumably, slightly warm,
Yeah.
is it?
The main pool's heated to 27 degrees, so
Yeah.
it's a little chilly to jump in, but it's a great temperature to swim in and do a bit of training.
And as somebody who's working in and around this building now, do you think the architects and the rebuilders have done a great job in the renovation?
Yeah, they've done a fantastic job. They've managed to copy a lot of the history of the building. It's they've copied the purlings in the roof so that they all look the same as what they did when they were built back in 1914.
Wow.
It still has a great historical feel.
Do they still have those? I remember from years ago, the little changing
Yeah,
cubicles
the
along the
cabanas,
side of the
they've
main
put them
hall?
back in. There's 26 of them.
Wow, yes.
So they're all still back in. They've put a gym in. That was there, I think that was built in the 80s, and they've actually built a purpose-built room for it now. It used to be on a mezzanine floor around the pool, so it was it was in the pool air and everything corroded and rusted.
I bet, yes, all of that warm moisture over the years
Yes,
must have
not great.
really wreaked havoc on the
Yeah.
old building, yes. So it's now all been beautifully, I suppose, redone so that it's a bit more impervious to steam.
Yeah, it's in its own little room. It's got its own air
Yeah.
conditioning system and everything, so it gets
Yeah.
no chlorinated air, so to speak, up there.
And was it always a unisex pool?
No. Initially there was two pools. There was a ladies only pool and a
Yes.
men's only pool. The ladies was
I
a
suppose
little
it
bit
wasn't
warmer.
done at all for men and women to bathe together in those days.
No, they had the ladies had a separate corridor to get into the pool, and they it was very much kept separate. I believe back in the day there was a lady that used to stand there with a whistle, and if any men came over to talk or look at the women, she would let them know where they needed to go.
Oh, for heaven's sake. And were the ladies quite active in those days? Or, I mean, was there a lot of actual swimming going on?
I'm not
Yeah.
sure. The photos I've seen, they had plants hanging from the roof, and the ladies tended to sit around and talk, I believe.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure how many laps were swum.
Right, yes. Maybe more for the blokes to be doing the manly thing in the
Pretty much,
men's
yeah.
pool, yes. So who's using the tips now?
We've got a huge range of people using the tips. We've got a lot of corporates who come in and swim at lunchtime before and after work. We've got tri groups, masters swimmers.
Tri groups, explain.
Triathlon
Oh, triathlon,
swimmers.
oh sorry,
Yeah,
yes.
and
This is the jargon, I don't know.
yeah, ocean
Yes.
swimming is quite a big thing nowadays, so there's a lot of people that swim in the ocean that'll swim in the pools in the
Right.
winter and just to maintain some fitness.
So it's kind of mainly for lap swimmers, is it? Just not the sort of place you go and muck about in.
The main
and-
pool
and-
is very much set up as a lap swimming pool.
Yeah.
We have a learners pool which is, it's a smaller, warmer pool. Some people swim laps in there, a lot of kids will play in there. On the weekends we've taken some lanes out so that kids can go and play.
Right.
Historically it's never been a place for children to go and play, but that has changed since the pool was shut. There's a lot more apartments in the city, there's a lot more people living in the city, so we're finding there's a lot of kids using it. far more than there was anyway.
So what, and does it open at the pre-dawn sort of thing for
We
those
open
early before work
We open
people?
at 5:30.
Wow, yes.
Generally there's a dozen odd people waiting to get in the door by about 5:20.
Yeah.
And we close at 9 at night.
Gosh, that's
Monday to Friday. Yeah.
okay. 7 days a week. Yes.
Yep.
So tell me about the whole learning to swim business. I mean, New Zealand's got a terrible history with drowning, don't we? The numbers just don't seem to change. And we keep on seeing these hideous stories about dinghies turning over and people spilling out and not having life jackets and not being able to survive. So how important is it that parents teach their kids to swim?
I think it's one of the fundamental skills New Zealanders need to learn. Back in the day when I learnt, it was not a life skill. Nowadays people see it as a life skill, and it's something that they have to do. We live on an island. You know,
miles and miles of coastline and lakes and rivers.
And everyone's perfect summer is one spent at the beach playing. So if you don't learn to swim, you're very much limited in what you can do.
And you're at risk in even what looks like quite benign situations, aren't you?
Yeah. A lot of the problems you have at beaches are down to people not actually paying attention to what's going on. Parents don't watch their kids, they don't look after them, they feel that the water's safe. By the time they get into trouble, they go to try and help them, and it's too late. Very sad to see, but it happens time and time again.
Yeah. So what's a good age for parents to start putting their kids in the water with a decent swimming teacher then?
3.5 to 4 is a great age. We do have a lot of babies, and they start from 6 months, and that really depends on how healthy your kid is. If your kid's a healthy, robust wee kid, 6 months is a great age to start.
And that's when they kind of just automatically reach for the sunlight, don't they? Or for daylight, well, they will swim.
The baby and toddler classes are designed around life-saving and giving them the knowledge that if they fall in a pool, they can hopefully turn around, reach out, grab something to save themselves. It's not learning to do freestyle or backstroke or anything else. It's more
survival.
of a survival skill.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, to think that babies that small can have that survival instinct
they do.
Ingrained. Yes.
Yeah, they do.
And how long does it take, if a kid's going along for a weekly lesson, say, about how long does it take before, if you're going regularly, every term? What's an average sort of length of time it takes for a child to be competent?
There's a lot of say that 200 metres is a okay distance to swim. Personally, I think 800 is a far better distance, which is a long way. 200 metres won't get you out of a bad situation. 800 metres, you're going to be a strong enough swimmer that you'll be able to save yourself should you need to. And that would take 6 years.
Gosh, yes.
6 to 8 years. You know, generally if you start swimming 3 or 4, by the time you get to 10, you should be strong enough to save yourself in most situations.
I don't think that most people realise it takes that long to be
they
good
think a
in
couple
the water.
of terms and the kids can swim and off they go.
Yes.
And it's by no means that way.
Gee, that's interesting. So what do you teach kids? I mean, one assumes that a good old 4 is the first thing that people learn. Is it the first stroke you do?
The first thing they learn, the 2 strokes are freestyle and backstroke. They're the 2 easiest strokes to learn.
Yeah.
It's not until they can swim, 25 to 50 metres of freestyle and backstroke, they'll learn to do a bit of breaststroke, a bit of butterfly.
Okay. And does it help to do intensive bursts in school holidays?
Absolutely.
I mean, is it a good idea to go every day rather than once a week's not long, is it, for 20, 30 minutes?
The perfect way to learn is to do a holiday course, which is either 1 or 2 weeks every day, and then the term as well. Right. They improve very quickly in the holidays, and then they'll maintain it and improve a little bit during the school term as well.
It's quite an expensive thing, I suppose, though, for a lot of people, especially if they've got 2 or 3 kids.
It can be, yeah.
And on top of maybe you've got judo or dance or whatever that other kids might be doing. It's
yeah, there are some swim schools charging sort of $18, $19 a lesson now. We're a lot cheaper than that, and we'll always be cheaper than that.
Is it slightly subsidised by
Well,
rates?
We're a council or a community facility, so we're not there to make money, we're there to make enough profit to cover our costs. So we're looking around the $12 a lesson, $12 to $14 ultimately, as opposed to $18, $19.
Now, you're from quite a famous swimming family, aren't you? The Bray name is up there somewhat.
My family's been around, in swimming circles quite a bit.
Trent Bray, for instance, is he your brother?
Yeah, younger brother.
Okay, and so all of you are mad keen in the water, are you?
Absolutely, yeah. My grandfather, my mother, very much a swimming family.
Wow, and do you have a special favourite stroke?
Butterfly was my favourite stroke. Yeah.
And are you still in the pool every day swimming, or
No.
are you too busy behind the computer
No,
now and
I
answering
get
phones?
I get in the pool once or twice a week, but I've stared at a black line long enough.
Yes, I guess. And you must have been enjoying the Olympic Games while they've been
Loving
on,
it,
watching some of those
it's
extraordinary swimmers.
You never get to see swimming on TV, so being able to actually watch quite a decent swim meet is a highlight for me.
Yes. I was staggered at just the strength of people. I was watching one race where they were doing 30 lengths of the pool. What would that be?
800 metres.
800 metres.
Yeah, 800 metres.
Yeah, which is the distance that you were saying is good to be able to swim. But the speed that those people do that is just, it would be anybody else's sprint. It's staggering.
Very much, yeah. Some of the 1500 metre swimmers are swimming amazing, 15-minute swims, and they're doing incredible times the whole time.
So some of those really serious aiming for the Commonwealth and Olympic Games swimmers, do they use the tips, or do they tend to be scattered around all over the place?
They generally, there's probably half a dozen pools that they'll mainly go to that have got coaches and programs set up.
Right, because it's really serious stuff now, isn't
it?
It
is,
it's not
but it's very hard to find lane.
Anyway.
No, it's very hard to find lane space as well.
Yes.
Traditionally, a competitive swimming program doesn't make a lot of money. So most pools don't want them there because they want to maximise their profits from other means.
Yeah.
There are some pools that do it and do it well.
Right. Thank you very much indeed for coming and telling us all about swimming. Let's hope that more people take their kids into the tips and other pools to
I hope so.
Get mobile in the water. Never has an acronym been so overused as OMG, short of course for Oh My God. Used all over reality TV especially to express varying degrees of shock and wonder. It's interesting how much it's used by people who don't seem to have a spiritual bone in their bodies, but feel the need to talk to God in every second sentence. I read now in the Huffington Post that OMG is not as 21st century as we imagine it to be. Someone's unearthed a letter written in 1917 when World War I was still raging by a Lord Fisher. He was writing to Winston Churchill about how important it was to stop the German Navy. "We are 5 times stronger at sea than our enemies," he raved, "and here is a small fleet we could gobble up in a few minutes." He added then that he'd heard a new type of knighthood was being considered. OMG, he wrote, with exclamation marks, insisting Churchill should shower honours on the Admiralty. In 1917, of course, an up-and-coming gent might take all sorts of risks if the end result might make him a Sir. OMG, has anything changed? Before Christchurch's earthquakes, it's probably fair to say the city's most shattering historic event was the murder of a mother called Honora Parker, who was bashed to death with a brick in 1954 by her own teenage daughter Pauline and her friend Juliet. The city and the whole country was scandalised. And so it was big news 40 years later when Juliet was found living in Scotland and earning a big reputation as Anne Perry, a rather famous writer of whodunits. Only recently did Perry agree to share some of her extraordinary life with Auckland biographer Joanne Drayton. Hello Joanne, welcome to Let's Talk. It's great to have you in the studio.
Fantastic to be here, thank you.
The first thing I want to ask you is how on earth did you have time to write this big fat book? I mean, you're the Associate Professor in the Department of Design at Unitec. I mean, that would be a big enough job for most people. And this is your, what, your 4th or 5th biography?
This is the 5th, yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
so how many hours a day do you work?
Well, most of them actually. I think it's an amazing task to get through a book in the context of a full-time job. I do work a lot, and I work a huge amount, vast amount in my own time, what I would call my own time. But as well as that, I have been supported by Unitec at times, and I did have I had 6 months off to write it.
Right, yes.
So
you would have needed all of that. This is there's a lot of work in this.
Yes.
Anne Perry, why Anne Perry? What set you off down this track?
Well, Anne Perry's been part of my life, all my life, and part of my mother's life, and because of course Anne Perry was Juliet Hume. She went to Girls High. She was 2 years behind my mother at school. And so my mother told me stories about standing behind them in assembly, And so that was the cautionary tale, and that was the fascinating story. And I think my mother honestly did feel that for young people, as a young person herself, that they'd been quite harshly treated with the amount of the sort of virulence of the media response to it, and the way that it gathered so much momentum. So there was a sense of something not quite right there for her, and I think that was communicated to me. But then I taught at Girls High. Yes. I was
this
there.
Is Christchurch Girls High.
Christchurch Girls High, yes, in Christchurch.
Yeah.
And then obviously where Pauline and Juliet went to school.
And it's part of the legend there too, no doubt. Yes, this is the school where.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. I think they do like to play that one down, but not very successfully. And you know, so I was teaching there briefly, relieving when I was doing my PhD in art history, which is why I'm at Unitec. I was there when they were making the decisions about whether to lend the school uniforms to Peter Jackson, and amazingly I got the last 2 tickets to see one of his shows of Heavenly Creatures in Christchurch.
Yeah, so I gather when they made Heavenly Creatures that the school in fact declined the use of any old uniforms for what even to copy or to were they wanting actual clothes?
I think they were
yes.
wanting, you know, they would have preferred to be able to do that. Well, that certainly they did decline.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there, is it? But one of the interesting things you brought up for me was that you brought up the whole baby boomer concept, and it doesn't occur to me that these girls were, you know, kind of almost in the vanguard of the baby boomer generation, and they were outrageous because they were these new girls who wanted to do their own thing, and society would not have it.
Absolutely,
and it's really interesting that even that far back, 1954, we're speaking of, that already that they were part of a generation which was different from the one that had come before, in a most outrageous way, of course.
Yes, you're absolutely right. They were a part of a new generation, but as you say, the vanguard at the beginning of that, and they were very, very bright. And they were at a school where those bright girls were encouraged to excel, to achieve, and so they were given big ambitions for themselves and a big hope for the future.
It's in actually a very small provincial town. Which
absolutely, yeah.
How long did you try and get at Anne Perry to try to make her to say yes to talk to you?
About 6 months it took, you know, and it was a flat turn down, a couple of turn downs really, effectively, and then I accepted that because really, basically, I thought, well, you know, she doesn't want to participate in this, and really that was the only way I was going to get a contract from HarperCollins in the UK, and so I read this book of Enid Blyton on a flight back from the UK, and I saw this was written by someone who didn't have the participation. Obviously, she was dead and didn't actually get any participation or buy-in from the family. So I thought I could do that.
I can do this anyway.
I can do
there
that.
is so much on record.
That's right. I did think that, but and I put the proposal in, and ultimately it was accepted. And then I had the dilemma, which was much bigger than I expected and caught me broadsided, really, that writing a biography of someone, even if there was a lot there in the public domain, even if her books were well and truly out there, I really felt I couldn't actually really engage in the project. And my partner said, well, why don't you...
Without meeting her.
Without her participation in some way. And yeah, my partner said, well, have another go, you know, have another go. And so my introductory line in the email was to her agent, not to Anne, because I'd been well and truly, that had been directed elsewhere from Anne. It was, you know, what part of no, you probably feel this is a case of what part of no don't you understand. Yes. But you know, I didn't accept no, and wow, they got back to me straight away, because I did explain I had a contract, I was soliciting their participation, and would they involve themselves with it.
Do you think the fact that you'd already done a biography of Naomi Marsh, another great whodunit writer, may have helped?
I think it did help. It did. It paved the way, but of course I had sent that to them when I sent my letter. Yeah, so I think it was the proposal that did it, and I think helped along by the fact that it was a sort of fait accompli, and they had researched me, and they did. I subsequently, you know, Anne told me that basically her agent and her publisher said, you won't get a fairer person than this. She's an academic.
Did you have to steel yourself when you went along for the first time to remain completely objective and not to have any preconceptions?
Oh yes, absolutely. It was the only way I could possibly begin, was to wipe my memory bank clean and clear of all of those experiences, and that was quite a challenge. And I got caught once when I said to Meg Davis, I said, wow.
This is her agent?
This is her agent, yeah. Wow, she seems like a really nice person, you know. And her agent turned around to me and said, well, what were you expecting, a monster? And I thought, wow, maybe I hadn't completely wiped those maybe I hadn't started from scratch. And maybe the person I was discovering was not, you know, was still being pulled back in a way, or affected by those associations.
Were there many restrictions placed upon you before you began? Were there things you simply weren't allowed to write about?
No, that's the other amazing thing, and this is like seriously true. I was given the files and basically given a room, a desk and a room at MBA, and I
This is her agency?
Yeah,
literary
absolutely.
agency?
Yeah, and I offered to send an early draft to Meg Davis because I was concerned about the facts, and I'm not insured. And these are BBC, and this is Prince Edward's Art and, you know, film company. And there's a whole lot of difficult issues around those things, and you know, the BBC is a very long,
powerful organisation.
And I have, you know, so effectively I was really protecting myself. And they didn't withdraw anything except a little bit of information that was, you know, about that BBC publishing side of things.
It's obvious from reading this is a woman who does have deep regrets and has lived with those regrets all of her life from this really, really weird time in her mid-teens. Do you think she will actually ever get over it?
Well, that's the big question. I think it's a big question. The answer to that is I don't think she's forgiven herself, and I don't think she will ever be able to take it away. She moves forward, she writes to give herself a future because she can't change the past.
Yeah, and the impression strongly comes through that in writing and writing and writing about murder and murderers and reasons and motives and consciences and things, that this is somehow a working through of all of her issues. But she denies that, I gather. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just writing stories.
Oh, she doesn't exactly deny it, but it's bigger than that. But that is, I think that's a definite component. And I think if you got her on the right moment, she might say, well, yes, there's some of that in it.
Were you a fan of her novels before you began?
Yeah, my mother was. And because as soon as I discovered her identity, I sent a cryptic message written in the inside of one of her books for my mother's birthday, you see. And
the importance of mothers. This whole saga has been about a mother and mothers, hasn't it?
Isn't that? I hadn't actually thought about that, but it has been about mothers, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really has.
Thank you so much, Joanne. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This week's big news that NASA has succeeded in landing on Mars a vehicle the size of a car makes me think how very ignorant I am of every sort of space science, and how pleased I am that there are people smart enough to explain stuff like the time dilation that would be experienced by humans who whizzed out into space for a good long trip. Einstein called it the twin paradox. Here it is, outlined very cutely by animators at Britain's Open University.
60-second adventures in thought. Number 5. The twin paradox. Albert Einstein didn't have a twin brother, but he had some funny ideas of what you could do with one. He imagined two identical twins. Let's call them Al and Bert. Now, Al is a couch potato, but Bert likes to travel. So he hops into a spaceship and zooms off at close to the speed of light. That's when Einstein's special theory of relativity kicks in. It says that the faster you travel through space, the slower you move through time. So from Al's point of view, Bert's time would be moving slower than his own. To put it another way, time might fly when you're having fun, but when clocks fly, they run more slowly in relativity. After a while, Bert decides to head back, still at close to the speed of light, and returns to his brother with his holiday snaps. But when Bert arrives home, Al will now be older than his twin, which makes their double dates a lot more awkward. Although it seems implausible, Einstein just followed his theory to its logical conclusion, and it turns out he was right. This concept of time dilation provides the basis for our global positioning system, which is how your sat-nav knows you need to turn left in 200 yards.
Hello, Carole. Welcome back to Let's Talk. Now, of course, the book of the week that everybody's talking about is The Search for Anne Perry. Of course, we have already interviewed Joanne Drayton, the author, on this show, and now I see you brought it in as well.
Yes.
For review. So what did you think?
Absolutely fascinating. And it is a favourable view, a sympathetic view of Anne Perry, who, of course, as we know, is Juliet Hume of matricide fame. I think that Anne Perry has agreed to talk to Jo Drayton on the basis that she will not, do the sensational, scandalous sort of thing. I mean, I think that Anne Perry has been sort of demonised all her life and has had some terrible interviews with people. And Jo Drayton has worked with her and got her trust. And I think that there is trust between them. And Jo has respected Anne Perry, and the trust has been rewarded, I think. Anne Perry putting her trust in Jo has been rewarded because, and you read it knowing that it is a sympathetic and favourable view. I think
but you also read it knowing that this was an appalling crime, wasn't
absolutely,
it?
Yes. Yeah. But you come to understand that this is not an insane person, this is not an evil person, this is a human being. And that's what Jo gets across, I think. She starts right in the middle, in about the early 70s, when Anne Perry is in Darsham in England, which Jo describes as being from London 2 trains and too far, too long, too far away. So she's hidden herself away there. She's been in America, and she finally ends up going to Scotland to live near her friend. I've got to remember her friend's name. There's two
Meg.
Meg, yes, there's 2 Megs. I get confused with the 2 Megs. There's a Meg who is her literary agent, and Meg MacDonald, who's her very close friend who lives in Scotland. Jo then jumps back and forth, and you do get about halfway, 2/3 of the way through, you start getting some of the details of the murder, and you get little bits of it. She goes back to it every now and again and tells you a bit more. But meantime, she's analysing these books. I mean, Anne Perry has written crime novels by the thousand. I mean, she is prolific.
Prodigious output, isn't
and
it?
very, very good. I mean, a number of them have been on the New York Times bestseller list. So
do you sell many of them through the Women's Bookshop?
They're not sold in New Zealand much at all. Now, this is a very interesting thing. Anne Perry has refused to do any promotional stuff in New Zealand and very little in England. She's very well known in the States, happy to do promotional tours in the States because they've never even heard of New Zealand. They're not going to link her to, her past.
But in a weird sort of way, I guess, I mean, although she was, Anne Perry was dreading the moment when she would be unmasked as Juliet Hume, in a strange sort of way, I suppose it's probably boosted book sales because it is incredible that someone who had done that as a teenager then made a really good living eventually as a writer of crime stories. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. It took a long time. I mean, I'm sure she makes a lot of money from them now, but it took a long time. For anybody interested in writing and getting their books published would find this fascinating.
It is interesting.
It starts from the struggle at the beginning with different agents and different publishers and trying to get established as a writer. And of course, now she's well known. And it was the Peter Jackson film, of course, that revealed who she was, and her literary agents.
Heavenly Creatures. Yes.
Heavenly Creatures, yes. Everyone in Britain who was working with her, they were just completely shocked and initially said, oh, no, you've got the wrong story. This can't possibly be Anne Perry. Yes. But as she said, she's sort of outed now as Juliet Hume in a way that's easier because she can't be got for it.
So a good, worthwhile read?
Oh, thoroughly enjoyable, and I think it shows her. I mean, the writing is very good. I found it very easy to read. It flows well, and it shows Anne as a human being.
Thank you very much, Carole Beu. That's our show. Thanks for watching. Next week we'll be talking to top sports writer Phil Gifford about famous rivalries on and off the field.